All right. Good morning, evening, afternoon. It's early for me in Boston, but happy Friday, and thank you for joining today for how to excel as a solo DBA. Um, Data is the most valuable asset that a company has, and yet even large companies might only budget for a single DBA. Your job description might not match up to expectations if it was, say, copied off the internet by someone who doesn't really know what you do. Your interview was not necessarily conducted by another DBA, so you don't always get to know what your responsibilities or the state of the database environment is going to be until you actually start a new role and have been there for a little bit. We're in kind of a crazy, wild tech climate right now where it's increasingly hard to um, get junior or entry or even some mid-level experience. So how do you get in there, get that job? And then if you're all by yourself, more or less, how do you grow in your career on your own while also, keeping the lights on at your job in your SQL Server environment? So in this session, we're going to talk about strategies and tools you can use in your first 30, 60, 90 days in your new role or to level up in your current role to establish yourself as a critical and trusted resource at the same time as upgrading your skill set and showing your boss and your coworkers that, hey, look, I'm working, I'm being successful, I'm growing, you can rely on me. So who is this for? This is for database admins at really any level of experience who are maybe used to being part of a team of DBAs, or you're used to having a manager who maybe used to be a DBA or has a lot of DBA understanding and knowledge. Or you just got your very first DBA job only to find out that you're kind of an only child now. You're on your own. So how do you grow, right? This is also for anyone who maybe wants to, I guess, buff up their interviewing skills to be able to portray themselves as someone who, even if they're on their own, if hired for a role, is able to go in, have a plan, be able to execute on that plan and show your results. Why I chose this topic, I haven't actually seen it done. We are in a fairly niche, high liability position where it's pretty common, almost weirdly common, to have just one of us. But we're also in a role that's defined very differently between different organizations, even if the job descriptions are exactly the same. It's important to be able to acclimate to a new role with intention and ideally with some finesse, even if there is no one senior to you in your role telling you what to do, when to do it, or how to do it. I'm Jordan Sassi. I've been a database administrator for a little over a decade. I've had the privilege of working in all kinds of team structures across just about every industry and consulted for hundreds of clients. Currently working at the Boston Beer Company. These slides and resources are going to be available on my GitHub after the session. So we're going to break this down into some tactical and strategic steps to take your first 30, 60, and 90 days at your job or the next 30, 60, 90 days at your current job and set you up for success in your performance, your coworker or your team relationships, and your career development. Not everything is going to be technical skills. You will see a lot of reference to soft skills throughout this presentation that are really even more important when you are the only coworker who deeply understands your job function. So your first 30 days, you're going to be doing a lot of learning, listening, and taking notes. You're going to be meeting people, meeting teams. Enjoy this time. It can be exhausting, but this is just a lot of be a sponge. You're going to learn. Days 31 through 60, maybe you're starting to respond and react to what you learned in those first 30 days, using hopefully the connections that you've made to establish yourself as a new and available resource, kind of, hi, I'm here, how can I help? Days 61 through 90, I mean, take that and then just, I like to say, be shiny. Start tackling low-hanging fruit and communicate it with your coworkers and your boss. Establish yourself as an available and trusted resource that your coworkers are regularly, aware that they can reach out to and rely on. Success metrics. How do you know how you're doing? How do you know you're doing well? And just as importantly, how do you make sure that your managers and your coworkers know how well you are doing? Key tools. You should never, as a DBA, you should never go into a new job empty-handed. There are so many really great free tools out there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I put together some of my favorite free, gold standard tools, scripts, resources that you should take with you to your job. And then from day 90 on, you're really just, keeping it up. So here I have a list of some very generalized DBA responsibilities. For each 30-day period, we're going to be focusing on 3 or 4 of these categories as our sort of priorities during that time frame, and go over what we should be doing specifically to cover each responsibility at that point in your employment. So we have environment discovery and documentation, security and access control, backup, disaster recovery, monitoring and maintenance, performance and optimization, automation, collaboration and communication, professional development. So during your first 30 days, you should be prioritizing environment discovery and documentation. This might be a no-brainer, but you will potentially be doing a lot, depending on the size of your company and their infrastructure, of environment discovery and documentation. Don't expect that you're going to walk in and have everything all put together and organized and handed to you. You are most likely going to have to go out yourself and find things. You can't assume you're going to be spoon-fed information, even something as simple as how many SQL instances are there? What are the server names? What applications and teams are connected to which data? They're not necessarily going to have that and be able to give that to you, but that is your job to go out and find. A word of caution, don't make any assumptions. I was 3 days into a contract at a fairly high stakes industry job, and I managed to crash a C drive running a basic super lightweight health assessment. It was one of Brent Ozar's first responder kit scripts, I'm pretty sure. And I just didn't really pay attention to how old and under-resourced and slow this particular server was. And so I managed to almost immediately brick the server. And I told someone immediately, which is super, super important. If you go in and you break something, let someone know. This is not a time to try to cover your ass or hide it. Let someone know right away what happened so that it can be communicated, even if you know how to fix it, because something is broken. But you know what I never ever did again? I never crashed a C drive by making assumptions. So like any new job, between learning new names, maybe a new commute, a new hire orientation, you're going to get a lot of information all at once. You are going to be drinking from a fire hose. You're going to be tempted to start making changes or recommendations for total overhauls, maybe, right away, depending on your ambition. But it's really important here to be both patient as well as organized with your inquisitiveness here. So you document your environment, inventory all your database instances, servers, applications if you can, where you have the information. Go ahead and note the hardware, software, network, security setup. Everything you learn about the current state, even if you already are hearing about pain points and opportunities for improvement in the near or late future. Find out if there's regular discovery scans, if your company is frequently spinning up new servers, so you can keep an updated living document, an updated living inventory of all of your SQL Server estate. Make sure you gather any existing documentation that they already have. It might be out of date, it might be wrong, you can change it later, but just get a hold of it in your first 30 days. Any run books, monitoring dashboards, or find out maybe these don't exist. You might get to make a plan to implement some of that later on, but find out what's there, if anything. Access and accounts, make sure you can access all the systems you're going to be responsible for. Address any permissions issues now, so you're not blocked later. You don't want to come back 4 months later and say, hey, I don't have access to the server, and your manager tell you, you're responsible for this server, why didn't you tell me? So if you still are finding that you don't have access to resources, just make sure it's communicated right away, early on, so that it's understood that you aren't expected to be responsible for that resource. That might be intentional, that's okay. Just document it and ask about it. Backup and disaster recovery. It's probably not reasonable to have a flawless backup and DR strategy in place within your first 30 days. However, you need to understand and document what backup methods are being used where backups live, backup frequency, anything like that. And if there are existing DR plans, great. Just make sure to have these somewhere where you can find them at 2 a.m. without caffeine. Save a copy somewhere where you aren't going to lose it. One of the reasons that we want to document existing backups is so that when we go and talk to other teams or coworkers about them, we can make sure that the intended backups match the actual backup strategy that's in place. So that backup schedule that's named every 20 minutes, but is actually running every 20 hours, might not be what the developers had in mind, but get this information early on and be prepared to use it. Collaboration and communication. Meet with developers, meet with systems admins and business administrators, or business stakeholders to learn any workflows, expectations, find out their pain points and projects that other teams are working on, and make note of anything you might be able to offer in assistance. Again, it's tempting to jump into wanting to help with everything, but for now, just make sure you're aware of it so you can look into it. Depending on the size of your organization, meeting key coworkers and teams can easily extend past the first 30 or even 60 days. That's okay. This is a guideline. Take a lot of notes and build your to-do list. Baseline assessment. Assess your database health and performance. Check error logs, job histories, baseline metrics if you have that information, slow queries, storage capacity, identify any red flags, failing job space issues, and note them to be addressed when you have the green light to do so. So if you see obvious misconfigurations or easy fixes, you're going to want to address them. That's great. Early visible wins build credibility. But before you change anything at all, I did want to mention it's super important to learn the correct procedures and communication for documenting and approving and communicating change. Even if your change is the tiniest, most transparent little guy, you need to know change approval policies. This tells your manager that you're serious about change management. As much as you feel like you know what constitutes as a change needing approval or communication, your organization might not feel the same way. They're not database administrators. They don't know that changing an autogrow setting might look like a big nothing and not need to be communicated to the whole organization. That is not your decision at this point. That's not even up for negotiation at this point. This can actually work out in your favor, though, because the changes that you make are going to be more visible. Save those conversations for modifying what constitutes as a change that needs approval after your first 90 days, once you've established yourself a bit more. I would also encourage you to track every change you make. ideally with a date and any relevant info, even if it's very small. I like to use OneNote for this currently. I have a notebook section for every server, and the date and time are automatically added to my notes. What you don't want to do is find out that you've made changes to an audited system, or you broke something and you have no record of what you did or when or why. So especially when you are just starting out, write down every single change. This can be super helpful too if you're troubleshooting a tricky issue and it happens again later and you're scratching your head thinking, what did I do to fix that? And then also because you have a recurring issue documented, you have a better argument for setting up a more permanent, robust fix for that later on. So using your to-do list that you should just have right in front of you at all times, draft a plan for your next steps. Prioritize critical fixes, backup security gaps to tackle in the next 30 and 60 days. Set short-term goals to talk about with your manager and align with business needs. I would make sure to organize your to-do list, probably by priority, maybe by time or effort it takes to make the change, but have some kind of sorted to-do list to track your findings that you can later turn into your accomplishments form once you've completed them. Keep another to-do list or a section on your same to-do list of topics you've run into that you'll be working with that you maybe need to learn or brush up on. That way you're always going to have something meaningful to do when you have some downtime, work is slow or quiet. And if you're proactive with your self-learning, you're going to be better prepared for future tasks, specifically at your job, if you note these now. So we're up to month 2. This is the time period where you're going to start to get more asks from your coworkers who have found out that you exist, and they will approach you with their database woes and wish lists. This is also when you want to make sure that you and your manager set up and maintain how you get these requests and respond to them. Your manager is the arbiter of your boundaries. Your manager should be protecting your boundaries. We're assuming a healthy workplace dynamic in this presentation. So you set your boundaries for the most part, but it is truly your boss's job, especially since you're a single point of failure, to be maintaining your boundaries. This is also when you need to make sure you know when to say no. Or just as good, I don't know, let me go learn about it, and stick to it. The precedent that you set here in this time period is going to be harder to change later on. You don't want to accidentally train your boss or your coworkers that you can be reached outside of work at weird hours for non-emergencies if that's something that's going to upset your work-life balance or burn you out. Don't even give out your personal contact information unless you are, for some reason, required to. Your first few weeks are going to be learning and acclimating. These next few weeks, you are going to start to create habits. And things will start feeling more routine if they haven't already. So don't let anything that is unsustainable become routine. Don't let anything that isn't your responsibility contribute to burning you out. So what is your responsibility? Your responsibility is setting your boundaries and being able to say no and I don't know. What is not your responsibility is being a replacement for needed additional staff. And again, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to assume a healthy work environment, but that's important to know that you are not a replacement for needed additional staff. You should by now have a decent sized to-do list that you've organized by time or criticality or whatever makes the most sense or is useful to you. Maybe you've been able to knock out a few changes already. Certainly don't feel rate limited by this guide. This isn't me telling you to only focus on the responsibilities I'm highlighting. The point is that you are correctly prioritizing, because if everything is top priority, nothing is. Your learning to-do list should also be growing faster than it is having items checked off. We're going to shift our priorities a bit during this next 30 days. Firstly, to monitoring and maintenance. So we looked at and documented what backups are running or not running. Now we want to pay attention to what maintenance is running on your SQL instances and document that. If there's no maintenance in place, set up routine maintenance jobs for databases, integrity checks, index maintenance, and document the tasks and their schedules. This is also a great time to find out if you have any existing monitoring in place already, even just for the server, and see if you can get granted access to that monitoring. If there's no monitoring in place, you have the opportunity to start thinking about what might be a good way to implement something for monitoring based on your based on your company's needs and their budget. This is also a good time to apply patches and updates. Plan and apply any critical updates or security patches. Practice using that change process in order to do so. Performance and optimization. Address any major performance or reliability issues identified in the first 30 days following any and all change policies. I've mentioned to you to have your priorities straight, which are pretty universally availability, then reliability, and then performance. However, poking your head into any existing performance issues or low-hanging fruit optimization so that you can plan to address it later if it's a larger task, or a lot of the time it's something small and easy where you can flip a switch and make someone happy. This is great. You're still in a time period where you are meeting new people and learning about their needs and wish lists, and performance is a huge quality of life issue when it's suboptimal. Seek out pain points during this time, write them down, and if nothing higher priority is on fire, fix it. Collaboration and communication. Again, be as visible and approachable as you can early on in a new job. Be proactive in meeting people and continue to keep gathering information. When you do fix your coworkers' pain points or other to-do list tasks, communicate it. Let your team and your coworkers know what improvements were made so that they recognize when you make progress. In addition to communicating around change and successes, you're going to have the opportunity to help educate your coworkers about why you want to make certain changes and what to expect. It's so exciting when your new coworkers want to learn something. But one of the things that can come up and be tricky to respond to is, why didn't our last DBA do that? I'm going to circle back for a second to remind you to not make any assumptions. This is also true for people. You likely don't know your predecessor. You don't know why they're gone, how their coworkers felt about them. It's easy to want to self-promote by criticizing their work, and to an extent that can sometimes be necessary, but you need to have tact, exercise professional caution, and be as respectful as humanly possible if that does come up. It's very possible that the database environment was in such a bad state before you got there that they simply had higher priorities. Unfortunately, on the other side of that coin is the fact that it's frustratingly easy to be a bad DBA. I'm not talking about a green new DBA, but actually a bad one. Another reason I wanted to talk about this topic in particular, being a solo DBA, is because I'd love to make it harder to be a bad database admin. Make it normal to show your work and results and communicate accomplishments, and make it more of a rarity for someone to come in and just coast while everything appears to be working well enough, because no one can really see behind the scenes as much as you can. We're not going to go much further off the rails here, but this is also why driving your own learning and growth is so important. You can't make someone who's working in a silo by themselves grow their skill set. I worked with the DBA as a client previously where I recommended that we add some indexes to work out some performance problems, and the response that I got was, okay, cool. What is an index? Which I love that they asked. Saying I don't know is a critical skill, but it was hard to hear that question from someone who had been in their first and only DBA role for 5 or 6 years and had never heard about indexes. Don't be either of those DBAs. Let's move on to days 61 through 90. Optimize and build value. At this point, you've hopefully had the chance to make some people happy with your changes, and you are getting more regular requests or questions from your coworkers who see you as a trusted, valuable resource. When you are a trusted resource, it makes it easier to talk about things like security and access control. This is a great time to do a security audit. Audit user accounts and permissions, remove or disable obsolete accounts, enforce least privilege principles for application logins and staff, check default passwords or misconfigurations, and document everything. If it's necessary, be thinking of how to propose better security policies for SQL Server use. For example, setting up Active Directory groups for user management, making sure service accounts can't be logged into, things like that. Consider advanced security improvements depending on your organization, the kind of data that they hold, encryption at rest, data masking, compliance for industry regulations like HIPAA or GDPR, and be prepared for audits by having reports or processes in place. Even if you're not at the point you want to be, you have documentation for, hey, I've been here this long and we've done this in this time, and this is the plan to get the rest of the way there. Continuing with monitoring and maintenance here, you should hopefully be able to see in your monitoring and the results of putting in your changes and keeping up with or refining database maintenance tasks. You're going to want to use these data to show your boss how well you're doing and start getting ideas about setting up regular health assessments. You should also have a good idea by now of if any additional monitoring is needed. Make sure someone gets alerted when a SQL Server is low or out of space or down, if there isn't any existing alert or on-call set up. You should also use these data to plan for growth. This is like forecasting storage growth. Try to anticipate requirements for upcoming projects or new data sources, and plan accordingly with your manager or coworkers for getting ahead of future needs. Performance and optimization continued. With a more stable environment, you can focus on optimization. Analyze top slow queries, expensive procedures, tune indexes and old code, again, with following all the change management policies. Support development in projects. Engage with your development teams on upcoming projects. Review new database designs or queries for best practices, because if you're getting in at the creation level of this code, you're preventing the need to be a janitor later on when a project finishes and the database backend is not so great, and then you just have to clean up after it. So insert yourself early on into this process in order to make sure that you've got a healthy database design from the start. And to no one's surprise, collaboration and communication. Again, at this point, show your results. Around day 90, prepare a summary of improvements. This could be performance benchmarks before versus after, number of issues resolved, risk mitigation done, updated health assessment data, whatever you've got. This visually highlights the value that you are bringing to your team and your company that you've added in just 3 months. Communicate these wins to your manager and your team. It builds trust and credibility when your coworkers not only see the obvious user end impact of your work, but also everything that goes on behind the scenes. So taking all these notes and all that documentation early on really makes tracking your success metrics so easy. You always want to be showing your work. be able to readily give statuses of what you're working on, and be able to communicate it in a way that you can talk to business people about it, and not just the lower level tech stuff. I was working in a position one time where I got a performance review back, and the performance reviews were set up so that every higher up in the company had a comment on your performance review, whether or not you work directly with them or not. And this is my favorite comment ever, which was, "She's at her computer an awful lot." I was a database administrator at the time. And I believe that the mistake that I made was only showing that higher up the flashy, shiny, polished results of the work that I was doing. They didn't really have a big idea of what was going on behind the scenes. And in a non-tech industry, that's easy to be overlooked. So when I say show your work, it really is like the teacher saying, show me how you got to the correct answer. I don't just want the polished, shiny stuff. I want to know how you got there and what you had to do to get there. So as much as that was maybe a silly criticism for someone who was hired for a desk job, but I'll always remember that and use that to try to show my work a little bit better. So the first 30 days, this could just be your notebook full of messy notes. No one cares what your handwriting looks like. If you take a lot of notes, it shows a lot of effort and planning on your part. Days 30 through 60, maybe you've added to a support ticketing system or a company project board, but even just setting up a Kanban for yourself that is visible to your manager would work for this. I think there's one built into Teams. You can literally use stickies on a whiteboard. Anything that you can count counts. Just show that you're working on things. Days 60 through 90, if you've not used DBA tools or DBA checks before, I would highly, highly recommend these PowerShell modules, and I have links to them later on. But one thing that is great about them is the built-in Power BI templates. You can set up PowerShell scripts to run daily checks on your SQL servers, and it's retrievable via a dashboard without you having to create it. Especially if your company doesn't have other monitoring tools or a budget for monitoring tools, set up DBA tools and DBA checks. It's an amazing free option. For days 90 plus, you'll not just want to be able to show current status, but also show when you affect positive change on a regular basis. The example here is Brent Ozar's SQL Constant Care. It checks in on your databases as frequently as you want and tells you when you fix stuff. I really like setting up comprehensive health assessments on your entire SQL environment on a regular basis, say maybe once a quarter, and being able to look at the deltas between the current and the previous quarter. Not pictured on this slide, but just as important as all the rest of this, your work-life balance. You should not be overwhelmed or burned out at any point. Your mental health is a finite resource that also benefits your company. So success at every point on this timeline includes your health. And this goes back a little bit to days 30 through 60 when we talk about setting up the right boundaries, setting up how you're going to intake and complete tasks for coworkers. Just make sure you keep on top of that, adjust quickly where needed so that you set up something that's going to work for you and be healthy for you. Key tools and resources. These are going to be a little bit small. Don't worry, they're in my slides. I'm going to upload this to my GitHub after, so you're going to be able to easily find them later. Brent Ozar's First Responder Kit. This is great for documenting and troubleshooting, or just getting a set of general health assessment data on your SQL servers by running a script. Adam Mechanics SP Who is Active. I think this gets installed as part of the First Responder Kit if you set them up as stored procedures. It's a little bit better than SP Who 2. for finding out what's going on. Alla Hallengren's maintenance solution. This is really the gold standard and my personal favorite for setting up your backup and your maintenance tasks on your databases. It's just fantastic. PowerShell modules, DBA tools, and DBA checks. If you've never used PowerShell, you don't have to be a PowerShell wizard to use these tools. What these modules are set up for is so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel or be a PowerShell wizard to be able to interact with your SQL management objects. These are absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot of information out there on how to get up to speed with them, and it doesn't take that long to set it up and run. So definitely give that a shot. Glenberry's diagnostic scripts. Glenn is fantastic. Every several months or when there's some big updates, Glenn publishes these sets of diagnostic queries for various versions of SQL Server, Azure SQL, that cover a huge range of checks. You should have these handy at all times and be ready to go with them, especially if you use a lot of different versions of SQL Server. Plan Explorer, this was a SQL Sentry tool. SolarWinds acquired SQL Sentry a while back, but Plan Explorer is still a free tool that's available for you to look into your execution plans. Absolutely fantastic tool. Eric Darling's SP Pressure Detector. This one's a little more intermediate to use, but there's so much educational information on how to use it. There's tutorials. This is also great for troubleshooting certain types of issues on your servers. So ongoing responsibilities for days 90 plus. I lied a little bit. We aren't going to talk about this really. This is every other presentation, not this one. You'll also notice that I didn't cover every topic listed. That's intentional. They aren't your focus that early in a new job. I mean, I was itching to talk about automation. It's one of my favorite, but it's just not relevant yet here as a priority during the first part of your new job. So at this point, really just pick up your learning to-do list. And when you have the time, always keep learning. I will say if you don't know where to find learning resources, yikes, but okay, maybe try looking up some of the esteemed authors of the tools in these key tools and resources and read their blogs and watch their presentations. There is so much information out there at your fingertips. There's just no excuse. So for final takeaways, communication is key. You saw that communication and collaboration was a priority for the first 90 days, the whole time. Don't work in a silo, even if you were the only DBA. Regularly communicate what you're doing and why to non-DBA stakeholders in plain language. This transparency is going to build early credibility and ensures that your coworkers support your initiatives. Track your to-do list, your accomplishments, your changes. Document the heck out of everything. Always have a roadmap for what you're going to do next. This includes your to-do list too, but approach your changes methodically and follow all change policies and change communication policies. Have trusted scripts and tools like the ones we just talked about ready for use when you need them. Don't wait until you need them to go out and get them. And finally, share your progress and your success. You're doing great. You deserve to be able to have this communicated and shared with your manager and your peers. And honorable mention, just embrace this challenge. Being a lone DBA is a huge responsibility, but it's also an opportunity to make a very significant impact. By following a structured, prioritized plan, you're setting up the foundation to not just survive in this role, but to really excel in it. Thank you so much. Are there any questions?